Oh, we're live. Hi, Krishna. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
So excited. Okay, so you are like, you sold three companies, and then, okay, I was listening to your TED Talk. It was so sad that like you were in a car accident when you were younger, and later on you've been building companies, and you compare Silicon Valley with Death Valley. I thought it was like such a funny comparison. And obviously you're very successful. You sold three companies already, and maybe we could start with like what were some core lesson that you've learned early on in your career that kind of like shape you into who you are today?
Yeah, no, thanks for saying that. Yeah, I think you mentioned the TEDx talk, and so that was essentially a period after I sold my second company, and I think growing up in the Bay Area, I went to UC Davis for undergrad, was planning on going to med school at UC Davis, and ended up taking a little bit of time off, and sort of got into tech, but. Prior to that, I always wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon and those sorts of things. And it really came about because one of the summers that I was in India, and I'd go to India every summer with my brother and grandparents and stuff like that. And it was essentially a summer trip. One of the years, a few days before we were supposed to come back, the car that I was in got hit by a drunk bus driver, and I sort of flew through the windshield, broke my legs, broke both legs, wrist, all of those sorts of things. And there was a doctor in the hospital out in Chennai, and he really was amazing. And he had studied in Iowa, and really funny guy. And I was like, I want to be able to do what this guy has been doing for other people, and that's really where I was sort of spending my time. And so everything up until that point was really focused on going out and going down that path. And so then med school, that the time comes, and I'm like, do I really want to do this? And that's where I started to spend time thinking about just other sort of things. And I was really fascinated by all the things that were happening on the internet. Ended up going out to New York, doing research at the New York Academy of Medicine, and deferring med school. And during that time, I realized I needed to move out of my uncle and aunt's basement in Queens to Manhattan, and didn't want to really ask my parents for more money. And so I started to build websites and apps and different things from that perspective. And I would stay up all night, teaching myself how to code and building things, essentially skipping research. One thing led to another. I ran into someone that was starting a company, and he was like, hey, why don't you come back and start this with me? And that's really, let's say that the starting, the starting points of everything. And so, I think thinking about like some of the learning lessons, right? Like I think one of the biggest learning lessons is starting a company is one of the hardest things ever, right? The highs are the most exciting things that you'll ever see, and the lows are just the most painful things, right? It's like getting punched in the face, and so I think that the big thing is just not giving up, right? Like no matter what, you just have to keep going and surviving. And I think a lot of folks like Jason Calcanis and folks, right, like talk about being default alive. And that's from, let's say, just being profitable. But I think you also have to have that mindset of you're not going to give up, and it's not going to be easy. So yeah.
I thought it was like really cool that like, one of the things that I thought like from your story is like you mentioned, like not giving up. But I also feel like entrepreneurship is actually neat. I wouldn't say neat to be taught, but it's like a lot of times like people are clueless about like, maybe you're like hitting a wall, and then like how do you kind of like find creative solution to like focus on it. I feel like as a entrepreneur myself, like I feel like I didn't realize that, like, but I feel like a lot of it where like you have to find ways to generate revenue, and like creating a product that will like eventually lead to revenue. Those are like the things that like I feel like I've never thought as like a younger person or like working in a job, because like your job is like a part of like a big organization, so like you never really think about that kind of stuff. So I wonder for your, since you have like started like 3 very successful company, maybe we could talk about like picking the sectors and like, obviously I feel like the 3 companies are like kind of for each one. So like the first one is like a local guide platform for Indian like metropolitan market. Maybe let's talk about like the first, what does the first company kind of like look like, and then versus like the second and third company. What were some like cohesive like theme that you feel like you've kind of like stumble up on or like just like continuously pursuing? And then maybe we could talk about like the Captivate, obviously. It's like the latest platform.
Cool. Yeah. So it's funny because you mentioned a company called Burp, and this was India's answer to Yelp. And so this is actually something I started in college, and I'd gone to India with a group of friends, and this was the first time we were all traveling around India across like the various countries, right? So typically I would always go to South India because that's where my grandparents and family are from, but had other folks that would go to other areas. And so we put together this this trip, and we came back and we realized it was extremely hard to find restaurant recommendations or bars or hotels. And so we're like, why don't we put together a review recommendation site, right? So Yelp existed in the US, but there was nothing like that in India, and we needed a way to create content. So getting photos of all these places and just bringing it together. So that was one, where I started prior to graduation, but I ended up, I didn't stay on. Like a couple of co-founders ended up moving to India and continued to run that, and that was acquired. But during that time period, I ended up becoming the founding team of an online ad network called BlueLithium. And this is, essentially it was the first behavioral targeted ad platform. It was acquired by Yahoo for 300 million. And I think at that time, this is where I learned everything, right? Like this is where I learned everything about advertising. And I led product and marketing there, and it was really about figuring out like how to understand how to build technology, build product, and understanding what that vision versus execution really was. I think ideas are always easy, right? That's like, it's easy to come up with ideas for the most part, but I think building systems or people and teams and building those momentums and inspiring people around those ideas is like the hard part. And I think it was really great to be able to sort of figure out how to balance that vision with the operational execution. And I think that was something. I think another thing is every company, especially in the marketing space, has a window, right? And I think that the window of opportunities is like how can you grow as fast as possible during that time period, and how do you continue to innovate? And if you miss that window, then you're really treading water. And so I think part of this is also thinking about isn't just knowing when when you have the perfect idea and know when to pivot, or if the market changes, like how you should change, right? And I think being able to innovate and call, let's say, audibles, like I think are really important. I think something else is just building teams, right? Like, because these teams are the people that build companies, right? You don't build a company, you build a team who builds a company. And I think that culture is really what compounds faster than capital. And I think it's thinking about how do you keep people motivated through ups and downs. It is a roller coaster journey. And so how does that really become something that, how do you leverage culture to be your moat? Because everything else can really be copied, right? I think resilience, which we talked about, just not giving up, right? So like if you think about that founding or the idea might be 10%, right? Like that strategy is like that 10%, but 90% of this is just having that emotional endurance, because you just can't give up, right? And there might be periods of uncertainty, like, do you have enough funding? What does runway look like? What does M&A look like? Did one of your main people get hired by a competitor? But I think building a company is really about building your emotional capacity to keep going when logic says stop, right? I think being just customer obsessed, right? And I think is really important, because you've got to build what people want, right? And not just what they want, but almost what they, even if they don't know what they want, it's almost thinking about how that product evolves into leading them into that future. And I think if you think about it, like, the market is really going to, customers and talking to customers and knowing what they want is really going to help you identify, it's going to allow you to become early, right? Like the market whispers before it screams, right? And you want to be early and find those, find those people, find those customers that are going to help get you there. I think another thing is just like having focus, right? I think a lot of times there's so much opportunity in the early days, and I think the biggest mistake founders can make is just chasing too many opportunities, and I think focus creates that compounding effect, and I think that's what creates scale, and so yeah, I think those are some.
I wanna touch up on one thing that you mentioned that was really interesting is oh, let's say your core employee hired by a competitor. So I feel like that's the major thing about entrepreneurship is you build up so much, you kind of train the people so much, and then what if they just leave, and how do you think about that kind of situation, or how do you kind of react to it? And then they may take the company secret or everything that you have taught them over the years, and then they just leave, do something.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's a bit yeah. So I think that the one thing, right, is I think everyone has to have purpose at work, right? And so and you have to figure out as a leader or as a boss, right, what is that employee's purpose, and what gets them excited, what gets them motivated, and if it is, and you have to, because some people, interestingly enough, don't just care about making money and revenue, they care about other things for that fulfillment. And I think you need to make sure you help those people, you help your team and individuals understand what that is and how to get there. And I think as long as you can lead with that, I think that really becomes like a framework to think about, because now you're not as worried, okay, what happens if this person leaves? When is this person going to leave? It's such a competitive market, but you realize, hey, this is more than just the salary that they get. It is helping them find value and purpose and create impact. And I think that becomes important. I think, ultimately, if one of your employees gets hired by a competitor or something of that sort, right, it's not just that one person that takes away everything, right? You still have that the company that you built is not going to live and die about one person. Sure, it might become, might be hard initially, but I think you can go out and there's so many talented people in the world, and sometimes when one door closes, there's 3 doors that open.
For sure. Let's talk about. By the way, I want to say hi to the audience of comments. Hi, Patrick. So I wonder, when it comes to building Captivate, you have been in the marketing realm for a long time. Maybe we could start with the product itself. Obviously it's an end-to-end creator economy platform, and maybe you could talk about the product for the audience who don't know, and then maybe we'll talk into all the business side of things as well.
Sure. So we started Captivate back in 2015, and it was really with this mindset of how do we help brands identify their Oprah effects, right? Could we predict when things would go viral on Instagram? Could we predict when, the velocity of content when it's being shared? And back in 2015, there was no notion of a creator or an influencer, right? It was just YouTubers, and YouTube was a channel. So we started off on Instagram as a social listening platform. Very quickly, right, a lot of brands that were using our platform started to ask us to help them activate influencers for campaigns. And that's where we went out and said, okay, let's go out and build a platform that makes this easier, right? And so today we have a platform that allows a brand or marketer to come in and decide, are they looking to run, what's their marketing objective? Are they looking to hit top of the funnel? Are they looking at full funnel, what does that, potentially look like? Then based on that, it'll help you find creators. So you can manually go in and select creators based on all the, based on your creative brief, based on the audience demo for, for the things, for the campaign. But you could also come in and just do this, essentially on your own, where or you can automate it, right? Where we make predictions on which creator is going to perform best, which content is going to perform better. And the full workflow happens in the platform. So you could think of this as like a Facebook ads or Google ads for running influencer or creator content. So finding creators, managing that end-to-end workflow, handling all the measurement and reporting, all happens through the platform seamlessly. So you can run top of the funnel campaigns where a brand might be taking dollars from TV and moving into the creator space, or it could be affiliate type programs like a brand like Zara that's looking at driving sales and running affiliate programs.
For sure. Maybe we could talk about for the for Captivate, what platform do you start with? Is that I'm sure it was not TikTok because there was no TikTok back then, but how did it kind of evolve into the platform that people are focusing on? And I guess what are some trends that you're seeing for in these different space that people are paying attention to in the marketing?
So I think in terms of the platform that we started with, so we started off with Instagram. And I think at that time we were making a bet on sort of the future, and really YouTube was this big platform out there. At that time, TikTok didn't even exist; it was Musical.ly, right? And so that's where it converted over to TikTok. But I think the platforms that really matter to the brands that we work with are Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Snap. So those are the areas that we focus on. I think LinkedIn is continuing to become more and more important and prevalent. Twitch as well, right? I think it really just matters based on the advertiser and the audience that you're looking to really go after. But yeah, we started with Instagram.
When for the brands that you're building for, what are something that they find the most challenging? I feel one of the things as a creator myself, I feel it's really hard to track the performance. Would people actually click on a certain link, or some of the impressions? I also feel as a as a quote unquote influencer / creator, it's very hard to judge the CPM, because your audience may be very high quality in your niche, but on the other hand, it's not Joe Rogan. In fact, everybody just have a million follower, and the numbers may not look like the kind of numbers that people are seeing on TV. So I wonder, how do you think about creating a solution for these type of tracking performance kind of issues?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, right? The tracking and performance is so important because ultimately you need to be able to measure ROI and impact. And I think if you can't do that, then it's hard to get more money into the space, right? And I think that's the biggest piece is helping brands understand the value of creator marketing. So $1 spent on TV versus $1 spent in the creator space. What does that essentially look like? How do you make that comparison and show the value there? I think another thing is just really thinking about the speed of content creation, right? And I think brands are really want to keep up with that pace of culture, right? And let's say traditional production timelines, don't really work when trends are shifting so much. I think the cost is also fairly exorbitant. So I think what our platform does is really help automate a lot of that process, from campaign management, execution, workflow tools to help brands brief creators, approve content, publish faster. It's really just helping them create impact and be relevant in real time. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think another thing that we really focus on as well is helping brands just understand and transition from awareness to commerce, or play in both, right? And I think when you think about when influencer marketing just started, it was really just eyeballs at the time, right? And it was just a brand play, but now it's really tied to performance and sales as well. And some brands need help to bridge that gap, and I think that's where we really lean in on as well.
Can you talk about like how do you use like algorithm to like track these things? And like so for a platform like LinkedIn, so like for myself, like I feel like I at one point I tried like Shield or like whatever to just get my own analytics. It's like kind of like blocking everything. So how do you make sure that like the platforms don't like block you from tracking? And is there like any way like, to
Yeah,
so
I think it is. I think it's tricky, and it's based by the platforms themselves, right? Because social platforms really want to keep you within their sort of walled gardens per se, and so let's say when if you do in one scenario where you're working with something like a TikTok shop, right? You're able to drive conversions there, and you can get those conversions back from an API perspective. Otherwise, a lot of our affiliate customers that are tracking sales or downloads, it's really happening outside of the social platforms, right? So you might be linking to you're linking to a story, and then you essentially click on that story, and then you go off and that execution, or let's say the transaction happens on the consumer, or happens on the brand's app, right, or on their mobile website, right, for example. So that's like one thing. I think these are things where the platforms are trying different things to really help drive more conversions back, right? I know like LinkedIn has their like insight tag, and and I'm not super versed in it, but I think it's very similar to a Facebook like conversion pixel, right? From that standpoint as well.
when a brand, so like I also saw that like an interview you did actually with the Lowe's marketing team, and then like I guess like when you were thinking about like onboarding these brands onto your platform, like do you find creator first or do you find brand first? And like when the brands come to Captivate, like how do you kind of like make sure that they keep spending the money? And then how, I guess like how do you think about the revenue generation from these platform? Because I've so the other day I was at a VC dinner, and then like I chatted with someone who also created like a different platform similar to what you guys are doing. And then basically he said like a lot of it were like manually you have to just be a account executive, like even as a CEO, like you have to be the account executive who just like collect all the brand budget at the beginning of the year, and then like you help spend it on your platform to like different creators. But um, basically the key of like running like a successful advertising metrics or like creator platform is to like have the budget spending on your platform, or like just like finding ways to acquire the budget first, or like I guess like how do you think about the business model through Captivate that like that's like maybe similar or different from like that approach?
Yeah, so I think from our standpoint, right, like let's say historically when we were just Captivate prior to the acquisition, we had two models. One was a managed service perspective where you would come to Captivate and we would put together the creative strategy, talent suggestions, and we would execute everything. The second way was having access to our SaaS product and making that it was a monthly fee based on seats and usage, and you'd be able to execute campaigns on your own. I think where we are today, right, as part of Influential and Publicis, is more of this almost like a CPM model, right, where we're thinking to brands, where we're helping brands identify what should that total reach look like, and how can we help get there. And I think that's the big piece, right, is packaging it all together and thinking about creators as a media channel as opposed to individual activations.
I guess like when you guys starting working with brands, like when you first started, like how did you kind of like land the first brand?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I'm smiling because one of the first activations was really around Comic-Con, and so Sunil actually went down to Comic-Con. We had so this was a deal that we got. Amazon was our first advertiser, and it was on a Comic-Con in San Diego, and Sunil went down with like 4 or 5 influencers, rented a house, I think, an Airbnb, and it was wild, right? Because it was like I don't think anyone really knew what to expect, right? Because it's just this new channel and medium, and it's really about like what is that new, sort of what is the new sort of it's the new medium, and so it was thinking about that is just like, great, eyeballs are awesome, having all this content is great, but it's evolved, right, over the last 10 years. Now it's not just having content doesn't solve everything, right? It's like making sure the content is relevant to your brand, but also making sure you get it in front of the right audience. And I think that is, sort of a big piece that we're trying to do, that we continue to do, and I think the market evolves. But our customers really, range. We're in that enterprise brand space, and so customer brands that are doing over 2 billion in revenue. That's fairly the target range that we go after.
How do you kind of like start with the relationship with the 2 billion and after brands marketing team? Like, do you at the beginning, do you like have to like manually outreach to all the marketing director of like these companies, or how do you create at the beginning, like generating the Excel sheet of like the top advertiser, and do they come in groups? So for example, let's say Zara or like H&M, like all the clothing thing that like you target them first, or like how do you think about like the marketing budget? For example, Amazon's like a very different, even within Amazon there's like the business side. So like for example, AWS was our amazing conference sponsor and like podcast sponsor before, but like it's very different than Amazon itself, like the Amazon.com/Prime Day or all that kind of stuff. So how do you identify the right person or right department to like go after?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a few different things, right? So brands direct, like they will have, where it is today, right? Brands will have a social team, a media team, or an influencer team, and there'll be someone responsible for creators or influencers, right? Because you no longer have to prove that channel. I think what we also do, right, is you can reach out to the brands directly and look at, identify who those people might be within those categories there. Like sometimes influencer sits under social, sometimes it sits under media or content. Other times the media agency that they work with, like a Publicis, for example, handles all the influencers. And so Publicis, prior to the acquisition, they were one of our customers, one of our largest customers. And that's why it makes complete sense to sit in that, within Publicis, because now it's like all of these brands that are looking at having, running influencer campaigns, they're already running their media programs with Publicis, or their TV programs, or whatever digital paid social things of that sort. So I think there's two angles: going brand direct and identifying the right channel, or going to their media agency and reaching out to them.
But I feel like if you're going to their media agency, isn't the profit margin going to be like lower for you guys?
Yeah, I think it depends, right? Like it depends on like how the value is created and what value or strategy the agency is doing versus what a brand might be doing on their own, right? Like, look, if you think about it, a brand needs to have resources internally to be able to execute campaigns. And so if they don't have resources, then it's like going out and hiring those resources, but are those resources scalable? And if it's not, then, I think that becomes its own channel.
I wonder, when you're training your first employee and then like finding the co-founder, so like how do you think about like identifying your own strengths? And since you have created like multiple companies before, what do you identify as something that you're very good at, and then like what kind of people do you typically partner with to help you succeed to like create this company?
Great question. I think, let's see. So I think just thinking about myself, right? I think one of the things that, I feel like I'm sort of focused on and understand is just thinking about what that vision is, right? And helping build out that vision and looking to the future, because ultimately, you have to think ahead, right? And if we think about Captivate, or if you think about Mobclix, it was always ahead of the market, right? Like it was before influencers were a thing, is when we started Captivate. Mobclix was a thing before we started it, before running ads on apps was even a thing, right? It was just free apps, right? There weren't even a paid app store at that time. So I think understanding what that vision is, and where the market, not where the market is, but where it's heading, and I think being able to translate that vision into a product and operational reality, right? And so I think that is I think that's a big thing. I think thinking about the team, where I think the team around me that is probably really valuable. I think is just thinking about people that are really dynamic, that are not just tied to a title, right? But they are hired, but they are driven to achieve outcomes and own outcomes, right? So they act like founders of their own domain. They don't just do their job, right? I think that ownership mentality is something that's really important. I think people that can that have clarity in communication, right? So they can take complex things and make it clear and succinct, right? I think people that can disagree with respect, debate with logic, and really align with speed, right? Because you don't always have to agree. It's like Sunil always says, right? You can disagree, commit, and sort of move forward. But if you don't commit to something, then you can't really move forward at all. I think a team that is really focused on resilience and optimism, right? And like we've talked about, startups test endurance, right? Like you look for people who are solution oriented, when things get tough, and I think that's I think that's just really important, right? Because you need to be able to lean on each other. I think maybe lastly, right, is just like a balance of like dreamers and doers, right? So every company needs both people who sort of think about what's possible, and then people who help make it real. And because you can't just see the future, you need to be able to bring it to market.
I wonder, do you feel like so since I feel like Captivate is more towards like, from my observation, it is like it's more towards like the brand focus. So like basically you guys work with all the top brands like Levi's or like American Express and like Zara and stuff like that. But when so I've seen these like kind of content agencies that they are like trying to gather all the, I don't know, LinkedIn creators or like kind of platform specific creators to a group. So like do you think they are making money? How does the money flow in the entire marketing industry? Is that like, so for example, I'm like the CMO Zara, and then like I have like a $2 billion budget or something every year, and then I'm gonna dedicate like 100 million onto a Super Bowl commercial, and then the rest is like like spread into as like a people call it like I guess like peanut butter spread or something, so just like spread everything. How do you think about, if you are, because you were a CMO of a company as well, so like how do you think about like how does the budget flow, and then for these like kind of creator agencies, can they exist, or like do you feel like there's no money to be made?
Yeah, so I think so how does the dollar flow, right? So yeah, I mean, ultimately it goes from brand to creator. I think the place that we really sit in is the brand side, right? So our platform is free to creators, right? It's really focused on providing value for a brand, right? And getting specific outcomes for a brand. And I think that's where we spend the most time. And so that's the bread and butter of what we do. And I think brands can go out and get money for, right? CMOs can spend money within the channel if they can show impact and results, right? And so ultimately, no matter what, right? If it's a branding and awareness campaign, whatever it might be, a CMO is always going to want to know how much is it costing me for a new user, right? And so it or it could be how much is it costing me to get a test drive, right? Or like a test drive sign up, whatever it is. And you need to be able to look at that and compare that across channels. So how much does it cost on TV versus paid social versus billboards versus whatever it is, and try to show ROI on it so that you can unlock more and more dollars. And I think that's where you start to see this balance of top of the funnel and full funnel for influencer marketing, because that's really where it comes together.
I wonder, so like how much budget are like people charging for propose as a creator? So like how do you kind of evaluate yourself compared to just benchmarking other creator on the platform? Like, how much people are charging, and then like based on like, obviously I feel like as a creator you can never guarantee this, like the performance of the video, like how much sales that's lead to and stuff like that. But how do you kind of like, how do you know the budget from the brands?
In terms of how much they want to spend on a creator?
Or like propose, or like a per creator. So like what would be a typical thing?
Oh, yeah. So that's like, I mean, it really varies based on the brand, right? Like there's some brands that spend 100% of their budget on influencer. There's some that spend 10%, right? And so, it varies from that perspective. I'd say like the budget sizes that we're dealing with are, typically in the millions, and maybe they start from a few hundred thousand, right? Because these are brands that have already realized the value of the platform and the channel, and and just thinking about how it goes to that next sort of how they extract the most value out of it. So yeah.
How much do people spend on influencer marketing versus like other stuff?
So like Elf Cosmetics, for example, I think they spend probably like 95% of their marketing budgets on influencer marketing. Unilever's CEO Fernando Fernandez, he said that 50% of their marketing budget and spend is going to go towards influencers, which is a 20x increase, right? So it depends on the brand, the product, the marketing objective. Those are some that are on the higher side as well.
For the 95% of like elf budget, like how would you suggest them to budget on? We actually had someone who was like, I think she was the chief information officer of elf. Like, yeah, so it was like she was like very fun to chat with. But I guess like how do you think about the like for, let's call it like 95% of the influencer budget marketing, like, and then how many influencer do you have to collaborate with? Is that like people should shoot for like the micro influencers? Because I feel like nowadays like people are realizing that like the bigger influencer actually doesn't sell as much. But how do you think about like the marketing dollar spend for a brand like this?
Yeah. So maybe let me think of, and before we maybe get into that, let me sort of talk about, I think about just like, let's say allocation of budget from, platforms. And I'd say like, I would say the old model, right, where CMOs would look at and say, how much should I spend on TV, social, influencers, paid search? Now it's very different. I think it's very much based by outcome. So it's what drives awareness, what drives consideration, what drives conversion, and how should I be spending money across all of those? And what are the tactics to activate across all those? So what's really interesting, and obviously I'm biased, but influencer marketing essentially touches all three, right? Awareness, consideration, and conversion. And I think that's one of the reasons why its share of marketing mix keeps rising, right? Because it does a lot of that upper funnel, storytelling and awareness, mid funnel engagement, and lower funnel sales. And so I think that's one way to sort of think about it. I think the next, when you think about a strategy, right, in thinking about activating influencers, again, it goes down to what is the specific strategy, right? So if you're going top of the funnel and you're looking for branding and awareness, you're going to want the larger influencers, right? Like you're going to want influencers that have that broader reach, that create cultural impact, right? That can influence other people at a high level, and that become your anchors. If you're looking for conversions, right, like that might be more of that mid to micro influencer that has a niche audience that's going to focus on driving, sales, things of that sort. So I think it could vary based on what that marketing objective is.
Mm-hmm. For who makes more money? Is that like the brand awareness people, or do you feel like it's more of the niche audience with the people with purchasing power?
It's different, right? Because let's say branding and awareness is let's say branding and so larger influencers are getting paid a flat fee typically to run to post content, right? So it might be X amount per post or per video story, whatever it might be. And I think that's sort of one thing. Mid to micro influencers are getting paid on a conversion basis, right? So when they're driving sales, and so I think there's no risk to an advertiser when you are driving sales, and that budget is, let's say, open ended, right? And so I think that's a big piece, right? I think because you just keep going, right? Like you can keep, if you can sell $1 million all of the all the time, then I think that that totally works. I think from a branding and awareness standpoint, budget is limited. So, for one post, you're going to make a lot more, but you might not have budget for like 10 posts, right? From the same brand.
How do creator like upsell to the brand? So for example, like if they have like one successful campaign, how do they land something that's more or like just like repetitive to have like a ARR versus like, the people who are just like one time, like, you're getting a brand deal and then like 5 months later you have nothing going on.
That's great. I love that, how a creator can generate ARR from a brand, because that's the ultimate way, right? From a creator standpoint. So I think I think if you think about that, right, like if you can consistently drive outcomes, then all of a sudden, right, there's no cap on it, right? So we think about the affiliate deals again. If you're posting affiliate deals for Nike or Zara or Mango or whatever it might be, you can have, as long as your audience is consistently going to drive purchases and outcomes, then you're going to be able to continue to generate revenue. I think another way is when you go in, and if your content and audience really resonates with the brand, you have the opportunity to go out and potentially generate a year-long deal, right? And I think that's also something else, right? It's like brands don't want one-night stands, right? With creators, they do want to get married, and so if you think about it from that perspective, it is right. Like, let's not do a post, let's do a year-long opportunity and campaign to create things that are more authentic.
For sure. What do you think? Like, how do the creator kind of like own the relationship with the brands? So if they're working with an agency, and then like, should they, like, how do they kind of like build this relationship that's more lasting? And what will be kind of like your suggestion or approach for people who wants to kind of like collaborate with a Zara or something like for a long term?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've done that I feel has found that is sort of worked really well is just thinking about these creator board of advisory groups, and that is allowing a brand to work with creators and say, outside of just doing a campaign, let's get 5 creators and let's put them on our board of advisory. Let's talk to them once a month and share, and get marketing insights from them, right? Like what, marketing messages, marketing campaigns, things that are launching, all of those various things. I think those are sort of things that can help generate, help foster a relationship between a brand and the creator.
For sure. Actually, I have a question on the AI side. Like, have you tried to use like all these like AI tools to build some sort of like equivalent tool to Captivate like before, or like have you tried? So I'm sure you have tried AI, but like I guess like I've also like just for myself, like as a content creator, so like sometimes like I want to measure my own performance and also write these like brand reports, and like I'm like currently playing with different AI tools to like build some sort of like dashboard myself internally. Do you have any suggestions on like what tool to use, and like in terms of like getting I guess like not being able to like stopped by the brands to detect as like an AI. Like I'm not trying to use AI to post anything. It's more of like I want to monitor, for example, how much download or like how much impression actually certain like campaign has.
Yeah, I mean, I think the AI tool sets in the space are just changing so much, and it's been so exciting to see, right? Like everything from using AI to drive efficiency in activating campaigns to using AI um, using AI within the creator ecosystem of just, let's say, building
AI
um,
content.
AI content, right? And so yeah, there's lots of things that we're doing um, in the space and working on for sure. Things that I probably can't chat through, but yeah, no, I think it's great, right? Like everything from like audio, right, and like the things that 11 Labs are doing. I think one thing that's amazing about AI is just really being able to helping make content,
Mhm,
the globalization of content, very quickly. So
mhm. What are some tools that like you feel like are can be used to build like some sort of like dashboard that like obviously it's not like as robust as like Captivate or like all these kind of like other top like influencer tracking system, but like I guess like how do you kind of track yourself to make your life easier to like kind of like creating reports and everything.
sorry, can you say that piece again?
Oh yeah, just like what are some AI tools that you personally feel like can be leveraged to build some sort of like tracking system for your own content?
Yeah. Oh, you're saying, can you go out and just leverage these tools to build something, right? Like I think there's a lot of open source tools that are out there to build, let's say tracking URLs or reporting dashboards, things of that sort. I think one thing that makes it challenging is needing, API access from the social platforms. And I think that's where you have an advantage by working with, someone like us, is because we have those relationships with Meta and, TikTok, Snap, etc. So you're getting authenticated data from creators. It's not just, like one aspect of it.
How did you guys like started building relationship with these kind of like bigger platforms back then?
I mean, I think it's you start from the ground up, right? And I think all of them realize the value of creators, and the big thing that they want is they want creators to create content, and they want creators to make money, and they want the media spend behind it. And so if you can help lean into that, then I think that becomes like a big sort of piece of it.
How I guess like when you were chatting with like these bigger brands, like do they build these kind of like internal analytics system in house that like they I guess like since I feel like that could be a part of their revenue as well. So I'm curious about like how do you approach when a brand decided to like or like a tech company decided to build their own like analytics within their own ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think brands definitely build internal, analytics tools. I think what we would focus on is really just having the most robust data around creators and influencer marketing, and then that becomes a channel within their existing dashboards.
What does brands want to see from the data? So like what kind of data do you feel like are important to brands besides like driving traffic or like a driving sales? I guess like how much the product was sold is kind of more of like obvious data, but like what are some other stuff that's kind of like matter?
Yeah, I think if you think about this from, let's say, the marketing, marketing campaign, like the marketing objective perspective, I think that's one of the first ways to think about it, right? So if this is a brand that is looking for reach and awareness, right, like ultimately their goal is to get in front of the right audiences at scale and make that brand culturally relevant, create cultural impact. And so brands will measure impressions and reach, share voice versus competitors, earned media value, brand sentiment, brand lift, purchase intent, right? Like I think those are the pieces that are really tied towards like awareness. I think when you think about full funnel, or maybe we can go before that, right? So if we think about consideration, which is really around just like building education and trust, right? So this is where you're moving audiences from awareness to intent, and so So this goes back to things like engagement rate, comment saves, click-through rate, brand lift studies. This is where purchase intent would be. Sorry, not the other one. And so I think that is that consideration. And then when you think about full funnel, that's where it's really turning creators to, taking creators and helping them having creators drive sales, right? And into purchase behavior. And so this is conversions, right? Actual sales, sign-ups. This could be tied to like discount codes or coupons, adding to cart, checkout completions, all of those sorts of things.
For sure. What do you think about how do you track brand sentiment? Is that like keywords from like the videos or like the comments and stuff?
Yeah, so I think we look at video, audio, and text, right? And so I think it's really I think the first piece is I don't think it's not just brand sentiment isn't just positive or negative, right? Like I think it's emotional tone at scale, and it's how people feel when they talk about you, not just what they say. And I think that's a big part of let's say thinking about sentiment and looking at trust, tone, authenticity, which are things that traditional metrics like impressions and clicks can't really measure. So from our standpoint, we essentially track sentiment in a few different ways. So one is really looking at it through like AI powered text analysis. So looking at comments, captions, mentions, right? Looking at positive versus negative, emotional categories like love, excitement, confusion, frustration, keywords that are associated with the brand, like expensive or clean or repeatable, and essentially turning those comments into a pulse about how people feel about the brand. We also look at things like comment level sentiment tracking. So this is, which creators generate the most positive association? How does sentiment change before, during, and after a campaign? What messaging or visual, trigger, or visuals trigger reactions? I think ultimately you have to benchmark things over time. So like looking at, how sentiment becomes more meaningful, like what is it pre-campaign, during the campaign, post-campaign, and how does that compare with other competitors or the industry average as well?
How do you gather the industry average data? Is that from like just other brands who you guys work with? But like if when you guys like first started, and I guess like how do you kind of like how did it kind of like evolve into like this is something that like people want to track?
Yeah,
Or
I think so. It's really looking at social listening, and you have to go beyond just the brands that you work with. I think the beauty of influencer marketing is all of the content is public, right? Like the whole point of it is to have as many people as possible see it, and so that is, I think that's something that we sort of look at across the board, not just within our campaign set.
I've seen so many companies that are trying to tackling all these like influencer marketing tools these days. Like what do you think like make you guys more successful than like a lot of other companies?
Yeah, great question. So I think when we think about it from a product perspective, I think maybe the first piece is really just focusing on data. I think the biggest thing that we've always wanted to do is look at creator data, campaign data, brand data. So understanding those three channels and being able to, the more data we have, the more we can build our training models to make predictions around content and creators, right? And so I think that's a big area that we really focused on. I think the second piece is building a full stack within influencer marketing around top of the funnel and full funnel and having a unified platform, right? And I think ultimately, if you can do everything in one platform and be less fragmented, you can get more dollars into the space. So yeah, those are a couple things.
What are you working on now? Because since I feel like you have so much success in the past like companies and obviously you're also investing on the side, like what are something that you think are like very interesting to either build again or implementing in your investing journey?
Yeah, that's great. I think we're in a super exciting space of just how AI is just revolutionizing how everyone is building the products that they're executing. Right, like now AI essentially makes everyone's ideas on this level playing field, right? And now it's about that go to market and how you actually execute. And so I think there's lots of exciting things that are happening there. I think right now, just given that we are just acquired by Publicis, we're building within Publicis and really looking at just creating more integrations within Influential and Publicis and Epsilon, which is their data platform, and really just trying to extract more value within the channel for brands. And so that's like the number one priority, is to be that all encompassing influencer solution for brands, so they don't need to look anywhere else.
What are some like AI trends that you are very excited about? You mentioned about 11 Labs, and is the future of shopping audio, or like how do you think about the different AI trends?
Yeah, I think so. I think let's say 11 Labs, I think, has been just really exciting. I think another piece is just thinking about like creative production, right? And so I think it's just, how do you reduce content production time while maintaining quality? Going from, let's say, copy and image, like text and image, to video storyboards and actual video campaigns. I think AI is not really replacing creativity. It's just helping move things faster. So I think that's one piece around just the creative production side that I'm definitely excited about. A second piece is around just predictive intelligence, and so the more data that we have, how do we make more inferences around performance before a campaign launches, right? And so it'd be great to move influencer marketing from reactive to predictive, because that way CMOs can really plan with confidence instead of just like guessing, right? And we want brands to know what a campaign success is before they spend a dollar. I think I think those are a few.
What are okay, so what are one last question. I guess like when you're building I guess like when if you're creating content leveraging AI, what do you see as like the most like creative and like effective way for a creator to use AI? Obviously, sometimes like people generate image of themselves like posting on Instagram that they may have like seven fingers, but like how do you like use it in like an effective way, but also like highlight your own creativity to create content effectively?
So I think one piece is just using AI to amplify, but not really replace creativity, right? So I think for creators, right, like being able to brainstorm concepts, captions, or hooks for the video, I think is really interesting, right? Being able to A/B test, content ideas. I think actually like visualizing a campaign before shooting, that shows brands concept, mock-ups or testing aesthetics, I think is great. I think globalizing their content from a language perspective, right, is huge, because now you can reach your audiences in that local language without having to, reproduce all of those sorts of things.
For sure. Okay, so last 1 minute fire round. Okay, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book, this is an old one, Crime and Punishment.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
My first boss.
What did he do, or what did he do?
He was part of the he was the guy who maybe got me out of the med school route into the advertising space. So yeah.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to my dinner party? Good question. I think, let's see. So I think one, I would invite let's say my co-founders. I think it would be great if we were thinking about folks that are not necessarily just in the space, right? So think of folks like a Jay Shetty for just purpose and storytelling. I think he's become a good friend. I think someone like let's say Sarah Blakely, for authenticity and just like her scrappy execution. I think Reed Hastings, right? Like just I feel like that reinvention and resilience. I think Mr. Beast, because it's really just thinking about scale and creativity. I think my co-founder Sunil, because it's just like you're a ride or die in every startup battle. I think maybe someone I'm definitely in like the wellness space and phase now, and so maybe someone like Dr. Mark Hyman. So yeah.
Why is marketing so interesting to you?
I think it's a way to convey messages and it's a way to convey messages without any sort of walls, right? It's limitless, and you can use your imagination, you can use data. So it is this mix of art and science. So
love that. Where can we find you also at work?
You can find me at the gym. You can find me at amazing restaurants in San Francisco or New York. Love eating. That's why I work out, to be able to go back and eat. So yeah.
Love that. Well, Krishna, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's such a master class for influencer marketing, data analytics.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me.
Okay, let me quickly answer